Welcome to the Educator's Clinic webinar session 1. أهلا جميعا في أول حلقة من ويبينار عيادة المعلم.
Thank you, Haifa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining in and for the punctual educators. A huge pat on the back for showing up on time. And of course, we're going to grow in number as we move on with the session. كنت حابب انه طبعا ارحب بالجميع في اول لقاءاتنا ان شاء الله تكون لقاءات مستدامة معكم في مواضيع تهمنا وتهمكم as educators. عيادة المعلم الهدف منها هو ان احنا نعود بالزيارة الى هذه المجالس، وان شاء الله this is a free webinar. It will be shared with you as recorded few days after the session, and also we'll be having a feedback survey after the session as well. As for now, I would like to please ask you to join me at menti.com. So from your own device, please click menti.com and access using this code 7264239. Just above in the screen that you can see 7264239, and jot down your expectations before we start the session today. هنخش على الرابط بس ونكتب ايه هي توقعاتنا، يعني من لما قرأنا البوست او الاعلان عن learning difficulties versus teaching difficulties. What is the first thing that came up to our mind? And please share it. And let's see your answers. Are we able to access? Yes, excellent. So we have 2 in the room only so far and 4 responses. Difficulties, differentiation, yes. How to bridge the gap, insights, learning versus teaching, nice. Is there a difference? And of course, you would see effective teaching, thank you. Classroom, of course, or maybe not. Maybe Zoom nowadays with digital and blended learning models. Levels, yes, levels of learners, levels of cognitive ability, definitely. Between teaching and inclusive classrooms, yes, thank you so much. We have 13 responses so far. And of course, طبعا, we have Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions on the chat or in the Q&A button in the chat as well. And Haifa will group all of these questions and inshallah go through them by the last 10 minutes that we have. What else? What else? Let's give it one more minute for this reflection. This is reflection prior a lesson. So anyone was kind of keen to know what are the teaching difficulties? I mean, we are aware of learning difficulties and learning disabilities, and you can call it whatever you would prefer, but teaching disabilities, teaching difficulties, yeah, there is a lot as well. Okay, so far so good. I think we don't have any more contributions to this, so we can move on. Excellent. So let's move on. Here is our Prezi slides for today, learning difficulties versus teaching difficulties. And primarily I have presented this workshop maybe 8 or 9, 10 years ago in a conference at the American University in Cairo in Egypt. It was about enabling inclusive education. And it really hit me that many of us as teachers can easily point out, issues in learning when it comes to students' performances. But when it comes to actual difficulties and challenges that are facing us as teachers, we kind of hesitate to do so. So today we will shed the light on both. I would like each and every one of us to close their eye for quite some time, maybe 1 minute, and just imagine, how does it feel to be a student in your own classroom? So if you are a student in your own classroom, how does it feel? How does that look like? For 1 minute, close your eyes and put yourself in the shoes of your student, one of your students, whether you're teaching primary, KG, early years, middle school, or high school, whatever it is. And think about it for a while. Now I would like you to go again to Mentimeter, the same code, and answer this on that scale. How would it feel? But be very, very frank with yourself. خلينا صراحة مع بعض. ايه هو شعورك او شعورك هتكون طالب في الصف الخاص بك؟ هل هتشعر بالملل؟ هل مش هتفرق؟ whatever. هل هتكون engaged و totally excited from the first moment to the last one? And let's be frank, how many are we in the room so far? 3. Okay, a little bit changing here. Some people are frank, complete boredom. Well, it's true, sometimes it happens. And I wonder why. Is it because of it's more teacher-centered? Is it because we are focusing more on our presence and what we are able to do, which is teaching, rather than the students' presence and what they are able to do, which is learning? Hence the word differentiation as well, one of the, connotations of differentiation. What else? 3.8 total excitement, 1.8 whatever, and 1.4 complete boredom. Okay, excellent. We move on. Thank you for being frank. So, to begin with, who dares to teach must never cease to learn. This is a quote that I always live by, because whenever we tend to start teaching, we feel awkward when we are back again in the student's jacket or in the student's hat. And that's lifelong learning. You always have to learn to be able to improve and to be able to develop. So we will watch this clip for 2 minutes about learning disabilities and learning difficulties, and let's see if we learn something new from this or not.
So, what are learning disabilities? Well, the term learning disabilities is kind of like a blanket because it covers a number of different disorders. Learning disabilities affect how a person takes in verbal or nonverbal information, how they sort, organize, and retrieve that information, their ability to remember it, and even their level of understanding. People who have a learning disability can struggle with spoken language, listening, speaking, and understanding. Reading and writing can be a challenge, and math can be a real hard stone to move. And just like how people's taste in fashion can range from socks and sandals to high fashion on the catwalk, learning disabilities can also range in their severity and how they affect people. Many people with learning disabilities are very intelligent, even gifted. With the right help, they're able to learn just as well as anyone. The alarm bells ring and the red flag is raised that someone might have a learning disability if they need an unusual amount of effort and help to be successful, or if they are unexpectedly underachieving at school or work. The impact of having a learning disability and the challenges that often come along for the ride, including attention, organization, social skills, anxiety, and others, can change as a person goes through life. From school to home to soccer practice, every person with learning disabilities is unique and remains unique as they travel through life.
All right, so learning disabilities or learning difficulties are not only cognitive, they're not only when it comes to mental exercise. It also has, of course, behavioral impact and social one. So here we're focusing first on the first bit of the title, learning difficulties. Here it's called learning disabilities. Is there a difference or not? So there are, of course, a lot of learning difficulties or learning disabilities, if you would like to call it. Some also on institutions like the IB organization, they call it LSR, Learning Support Requirements. In the UK, they are still calling it SEND, Special Education Need and Disabilities or Difficulties. And of course, you have learning difficulties that are related to reading, which is dyslexia, to reading math, which is dyscalculia, to writing and producing text, which is dysgraphia, to dyspraxia, which is the hand motor skills and the coordination between fine motor and gross motor skills, to central auditory processing disorder in terms of processing and remembering the language related to speech and language issues, to nonverbal learning disorder and body language, poor coordination, to visual perception and visual motor deficiency, to language disorder, as we mentioned, aphasia or dysphagia, poor reading comprehension, and all of these learning difficulties. And of course, they are overlapping. I mean, it is really difficult to diagnose unless you are qualified to do so, and unless there is a process, a huge process to do so, and a large, extended one that involves parents, involves the learner themselves, and involves the school or the environment that they are learning in. So yes, these are the learning disabilities or the learning difficulties. And to be honest, when I first got introduced to the learning difficulties, I've had been quite some time teaching already in the classroom. But when I started learning into details of each and every item of those, and of course, each one can be a workshop or a session in itself, I paused and I pondered and I asked myself, how dare I step a foot into the classroom without knowing these in the first place, without knowing how the brain works, without knowing how executive functioning is, without knowing how the information comes to the brain, what happens in the brain with this information, and then what happens to retrieve it and reproduce it and rephrase it in another type of information. So this basically is executive functioning, and you can have any issue, in this process that can lead to forgetting, whether it's an issue in attention, for example, as ADHD, inattentiveness. This actually impedes the information to come and to be received by the sensory memory in the first place. And if this is not attended to, you forget easily. Then if it does access your sensory memory to the short term or the working memory, and then it does not relate, you do not actually process it for 30 to 50, from 15 to 30 seconds, also it gets forgotten. And then to relate the short-term memory to the long-term memory, you need rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, so that you can relate what you know from before, what you already learned, with what you are newly learning. So the new learning with the actually already learned bits of information in your mind. And accordingly, you can process new bits of information. And here, when it comes to creativity and high order thinking skills in Bloom's taxonomy, as we will relate to later on. So actually, what happens when the information comes to the mind and happens inside and processing and storage and linking short-term memory to long-term memory, if I have an issue in the attention, what will happen to this bit of information? And if I don't have an issue in attention, if I have an issue in processing speed, for example, what will happen in my processing to be able to produce information again? And that's basically learning science. So many of us would say, so we need to assess because issues overlap in learning difficulties and learning disabilities. And I mean, diagnostics happens to actually make the qualified people to assess and actually put their hands on the main issue so that we are able to fix and maybe to alleviate some issues in learning difficulties might not be fixed unless they are accommodated to. So why assess? Do we assess to label? Do we assess to just check a box and give the necessary accommodations and that's it, or to give an excuse, for example, for the learner that they are ADHD. Let's just that's them. Leave them be. Of course not. It's basically there are many types of psychometric assessments that are done again by qualified accredited assessors or evaluators when it comes to numerical reasoning, verbal, inductive reasoning, and IQs, and also when it comes to Conners 3 for ADHD and CAT4 for cognitive abilities and cognitive behavior. And that's not a must to have these types of assessments done for each and every student, of course, because at the end of the day, it's not about the over flooding data that you have in the school, but how you process this data and how you move on with analyzing it. Learning difficulties are actually challenges, but are opportunities as well, if we have the right help and if knowing that every person is unique by far. So whether we understand and whether we assess and whether we know exactly each and every student in front of us, what are they, what is their learning process and what is their diagnosis, for example, if we face some of these issues in our classroom, whether you know that or not, as a teacher, you need to think about how you can challenge your skills to reach each and every student. Because definitely you cannot teach who you cannot reach. So with the right help, by knowing your students and knowing that every person is unique. Of course, this is a very, very famous picture comparing equality. If you feel that to make all your learners equal and to be fair to all your learners, you are providing the same teaching. So if you're providing the same teaching for everyone, you go home and you feel that you're satisfied because you've been doing, the same effort on everyone, on every learner in your classroom. However, this does not lead to equity or inclusion. Inclusive practices means that you can, take the extra mile to reach the student who needs more effort from you as a teacher to be reached to. And accordingly, of course, different support is given to different individuals so that at the end of the day, they all have the same learning outcome or even excel. And this shifts us now to the second part of the talk for today, teaching difficulties. So if we understand learning difficulties and if we get, kind of a workshop about it, not necessarily everyone here needs to be a SENCO or a special education need coordinator or actually be specialized in, knowing how the brain works, but you need to know, a bit of information on each and every level so that you are well aware of it. However, teaching part, what do we do? What are the difficulties that we face in front of these multiple learning difficulties that the students are facing in front of us? So the first thing is basically to think about the classroom in 3 tiers, which is called RTI, response to intervention. These 3 tiers are the classification of your classroom in front of you. I have a core classroom instruction for 80 to 85% of my students and learners. And I have an extra task to differentiate my teaching and to differentiate the learning of my students of 10 to 15% of my classroom that I am aware of and that I am able to cater for according to the, of course, cognitive level and the learning gap in the curriculum that they are facing due to my assessments, my diagnostics, my formatives, my summatives. And last but not least, of course, the third tier, which is should be 5 to 10% only of your classroom, and as a whole of the school as well, unless it is a school that is well equipped to cater for students with higher and severe learning difficulties. So this comes to the continuum of time and data intensity. The data that you collect on your learners will be able to make you differentiate your teaching accordingly. So you have to primarily look at it, where does each learner sit, in which tier? Would it be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? طبعا انا يعني primarily كنت انوي انه يكون في translingualism في هذه الحلقه، يعني او في هذا اللقاء، ان احنا نتابع ما بين اللغه العربيه واللغه الانجليزيه. لكن هيكون صعب بس بناء على الوقت يعني. فبليز if you still feel that you want، لو في من الحضور، الساده الحضور، حد يحب ان هو الحديث يكون باللغه العربيه، ممكن نكتب في الشات وهيفا تبلغني. بعد ذلك ممكن نكمل باللغه الانجليزيه للجميع. Because I'm keen to be on time and to finish on time as well. So if there is a need for Arabic translingualism, as we mentioned in the post, please let me know. Type class. Now we are going to speak about tier 1. The rest of the difficulties is going to focus on tier 1, regardless of whether I have diagnosed students in tier 2 or tier 3. خلاص? So let's just forget learning difficulties for a moment and focus on teaching difficulties. If I have a mainstream classroom, no one facing any issues, what do I need to do? What do I need to know? First of all, of course, knowing the curriculum. And let's be frank with each other. This is the educator's clinic. Let's be very frank and clear to each other. To what extent are we fully aware of our curriculum that we are teaching? To what extent are we qualified to teach what we are teaching?
حاتم, sorry for interruption.
Really?
So please translate لأنه some people they want it in English and others want the translation.
طيب ممتاز، خلاص يبقى هنبدأ نعمل الترانسلينجواليزم اللي وعدنا بيه. فهنا بنتحدث عن مسألة معرفة المنهاج الأمامي. طبعا المنهاج المعلم أو المنهاج المكتوب هو المخرجات التعلم. إلى أي مدى أنا بستثمر من وقتي كمعلم إن أنا أركز على مخرجات التعلم، وليس فقط لأن أنا أحطها في خطة الدرس أو في الخطة الأسبوعية أو في خطة الوحدة. وبالتالي بيكون هناك انفكاك للأسف الشديد في بعض الوقت ما بين المنهج المكتوب والمنهج المعلم. المنهج المكتوب بنكتبه لمجرد ان إدارة المدرسة محتاجاه ومحتاجة ان هي تشوفه، والمنهج المعلم ممكن اكون انا بقدر ان انا اعمل فيه ديفرنشيشن او مراعاة الفروق الفردية او التميز الصفي، لانه للأسف ممكن يكون في انفكاك زي ما قلنا ما بين المنهج المكتوب والمنهج المعلم. وساعتها لما باجي على المنهج المقيم، الأسست curriculum, I find it hard to align it. What will I be assessing? Will I assess what I assumed I am teaching, اللي هو written curriculum, ولا will I assess the taught curriculum, the actual teaching that I did? And هنا there is a very important factor that you can rely on. When you create your assessment while you are creating the unit before the teaching happens, you are aligning it with the written curriculum, which should be the case. Then you are forcing yourself and the learning environment to reach the end point of the written curriculum, to reach the plan, because if you don't plan, then you will be stretched left, right, and center with the classroom environment. Align your teaching to the written and the assessed curriculum. فهنا بنقول إنه في نصيحة إن تبدأ بوضع الاختبار طبقا للخطة للدرس وخطة الوحدة، ويكون التعليم مبني على الاختبار اللي بالفعل تم وضعه قبل الوحدة ما تبدأ، بحيث لا يؤثر عليك مستوى الطلاب في وضع هذا الاختبار، ويكون المؤثر الأساسي هو learning outcomes. طبعا هنا هنيجي نقول this is more probably understanding by design because it's backward design. You're designing according to the learning outcomes. فهنا some educationalists call this fitting the child to the curriculum. People who work more with UDL, which is the Universal Design of Learning, will be more advocates of fitting the curriculum to the child. انه مهما كان الولد فين او البنت فين في learning outcomes that we need to reach them to be able to teach them. Actually, it goes both ways. لأنه this is actual differentiation. You have the mainstream classroom where they are exactly according to your diagnosis, and also you have your learners within that realm. So accordingly, learners constructing their meaning according to these three cycles. So how do I look at assessment as part of learning and not only as a standalone process? فاختصارا, know your curriculum. اعرف المنهج الخاص بيك. Know your hidden curriculum. That's the second part. So it's not only about the cognitive skills. It's not only about the mental ability and the mental capacity. There is a lot going on behind the scenes that you need to be well aware of. How learning takes place, again. And these skills are crucial skills. We call it the metacognitive skills, أو المهارات ما بعد الإدراكية, اللي هي اللي بتساعد أو بتعاون على الإدراك، وليست المهارات الإدراكية الخاصة بكل مادة أو كل مهارة. فبالتالي طبعا الكوميونيكيشن، التواصل، والمهارات الاجتماعية، ومهارات إدارة الذات، ومهارات البحث، ومهارات التفكير، كل هذه المهارات إلى أي مدى أنا بقدر إن أنا أدرسها بشكل مباشر أو بشكل غير مباشر، بالتخطيط طبعا الأفقي والرأسي مع المنهج ومع مخرجات التعلم الخاصة بيا. فبالتالي ده تاني نقطة لازم ان انا اعرفها، مش فقط المنهج ومخرجات التعلم اللي هي مهارات إدراكية، لكن ايضا المهارات ما بعد الإدراكية او الميتا كوجنيتيف سكيلز، اللي بتقدر ان هي تساعد الطالب ان هو يقدر يتعلم بشكل فيه اوتونومي، بشكل فيه اعتماد على الذات. لانه هدفنا في النهاية we create lifelong learners. احنا محتاجين ان احنا يكون الطالب يخرج من تحت ايدينا يقدر يتعلم ويكتسب هذه المهارات، بحيث انه يتعلم بشكل تلقائي فيما بعد، مش محتاج معلم دائما موجود، وخاصة طبعا حاليا مع الديجيتال era that we are living in. طيب, what is the third point here to focus on? Teaching difficulties. Know your students. احنا قلنا know your curriculum, know your hidden curriculum, know your students. To what extent? هنا طبعا يعني في كتير قوي من للأسف النظريات الغير مبنية على أسس علمية ومنتشرة ما بيننا كمعلمين، وأنا شخصيا كنت متأثر بيها من أول ما بدأت كإنكلوجن كوردينيتور، وبدأت أعمل يعني extensive work على فكرة الليرنينج ستايلز، وفكرة ان في طالب حركي وطالب سمعي وطالب بصري وطالب كذا، وده بيتعلم بالشكل الفلاني، ونعمل بقى استيفاءات وسيرفيز، ونبدأ نحط في الليرنر بروفايل كل واحد بيتعلم ازاي. And at the end of the day, this is non-research based myth in learning. just for the sake of it, يعني برضو من ضمن الحاجات اللي أنا شخصيا لسه ما أقدرش أعرف، يعني ما أقدرش أجزم is it research based or not, but it's very, very famous among us. Are you right or left-brained? Is this a myth or is this a fact based on research? For example, knowing your stronger eye. Of course, many of people playing sports, they actually analyze that, especially when it comes to tennis مثلا or whatever. What is your strongest eye? What is your strongest foot? What is your strongest hand? But in learning, how does that impact learning? Your dominant brain, how does that impact your learning? And primarily, and of course, eventually your teaching as well. The 7 styles of learning. طبعا يعني this I'm just sharing it for the sake of relating to the fact that this is a myth and it's not research based. And if you gain and if you invest a lot of time categorizing your students, who is oral, who is social, who is interpersonal, who is intrapersonal, who is kinesthetic, who is verbal, and the VARC survey, visual, oral, kinesthetic, and auditory. All of this, how will this lead to a huge impact in students' learning? While primarily you should differentiate, and you should actually, as a teacher, create all kinds and sorts of learning engagements that encompass all these types in the first place. Even if a student learns better visually, for example, does that mean that he does not learn orally? Of course not. So we have to always differentiate and have a variety of tools and a variety of assessments moving forward. طيب، وماذا بعد؟ يعني أنا عرفت المنهاج، عرفت المنهاج الخفي أو اللي هو الهيدن كريكولم أو السوشيال ايموشنال سكيلز والميتا كوجنيتيف سكيلز. اتعرفت على ستودنتس، أعرف إزاي ستودنتس أعرفهم من التالنتس. اقدر ان انا اتعرف على الطلاب في informal discussions، مين كويس في ايه، لانه كتير جدا بيكون بعض الطلاب ضعاف في المادة الخاصة بيا. طب خلاص، يعني هي دي نهاية العالم. Get to know them better, get to know what they are actually good at, so that you can build their confidence according to what they are good at and bridge this gap to your actual subject. And at the end of the day, يعني people are different. People have different preferences, even in learning. Athletic activities, if they are, for example, more into sport that will affect sometime their time and their concentration, you need to know it. Maybe, for example, people who go to train on swimming a lot, that's early morning every day, 5 days a week. This will affect ممكن the last couple of periods of the day. خلاص they will be done by that and knackered. عنده حساسيات معينة، في مشاكل ما بين الأب والأم بتؤثر على إنه الطالب ممكن ما يكونش مركز، أو دايما بيكون في عنده inner thoughts بالخناق أو الصوت العالي اللي بيحصل في البيت أو الانفصال أو غيره. To what extent does that affect? To what extent do I, as a teacher, need to know what's going on, to an extent, of course, at home? Will birth order, even that, affect students' psychology and students' well-being? فجنرالي speaking, there is a lot to know to formulate a learner profile. يكون عندي بروفايل للمتعلم. ده من مسؤولياتي أنا كمعلم، وطبعا من مسؤوليات المدرسة كمان إن هي توفره كإدارة للمعلم. ننتقل إلى النقطة الرابعة الخاصة، طبعا يعني كلنا كمعلمين عارفين المثلث أو هرم بلوم. هنا الحقيقة هو مش معمول كهرم، هو معمول كشكل لايت bulb يعني. And of course it is where to place your learner in the thinking level, in the high order thinking skills or low order thinking skills. All the knowledge and information and memorizing and conforming education happens in the low order thinking level. It doesn't primarily relate to where they are from when it comes to the maturity level. Of course, vertically and horizontally, this can change. So you need to be agile in your teaching so that you can adapt your teaching to where the learners are in this specific lesson, in this specific topic, in this specific unit. Because you might find, for example, a specific topic that is very easy for a specific learner, that they can jump up above the high order thinking skills from knowledge to synthesis and evaluation. But then in the same subject, another lesson, it's kind of hard. So they are still struggling لسه in knowing and understanding and comprehending. And of course, this will eventually, and all these command terms هنا in these colors بتساعدني هذه الأفعال إن أنا أقدر أحدد بالformative assessments فين الطالب موجود على level of thinking. So accordingly, my questions for the formative notes or by the end of the day, or exit tickets or whatever, can help me know where the students is in the learning journey. And this is always what we need to highlight. By the end of the day, the assessment is not to label. The assessment is to exactly know where the learner is in the timeline of learning, which is actually very changeable, of course, and it depends from a lesson to the other. It depends when they are learning, from the day to the other, from the time during the day to the other as well. طيب, building Bloom taxonomy on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, of course, the social emotional build up to learning, the foundation that you need to have as a human being. You need to satisfy your needs, which are psychological first, safety, and you need to create a sense of belonging and significance to the environment that you are in, a sense of self-esteem and self-actualization. So I desire to become the person I am, and this gives you the confidence to learn, because while we are learning, we make mistakes, and mistakes are more opportunities to learn. So you have to feel safe in your environment to make mistakes. So are we, as teachers, creating this safe environment for learners to make mistakes? يعني لو حد من الطلاب وانا بشتغل مثلا اتريق على خطأ طالب تاني، طب انا ده بره الامر عندي، انا ما اتريقتش طبعا، انا كمعلم فاهم عارف الاساسيات كلها. It is my responsibility if this happens to, step up to it and analyze the issue and be part of the solution, and create this safe environment and safe psychological environment in the classroom that is conducive to learning, because learning is all about making mistakes. فagain طبعا زي ما ناس كتير بتحب تقول, we have to maslow before we bloom. We have to fix the foundations before we go for the innovations. Another teaching difficulty, which is basically how to treat my learners. I just mentioned بيحصل مشاكل قدامي, بيحصل سوء سلوك. Of course now I'm focusing on the curriculum, the metacognitive skills, how to know my students, Bloom's taxonomy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but there is an issue happening in the classroom. Two children fighting against each other. All of this, teaching strategies and learning strategies and whatever will go out of the window, and I have to fix this right now and right away. What are the strategies that I have to fix behavioral issues if I need to be fixing them? Of course, there are multiple approaches towards behavior management in class, in schools. One of which that I fully adopt is positive discipline. ألفريد أدلر's psychology في السلوك الإيجابي والانضباط الإيجابي. في 5 معايير أساسية للانضباط الإيجابي بتساعد الكير ريسيفر أو المربى على إن هو يحس بإن هو عنده انتماء للمكان، وإن هو يحس إن هو بيعامل باحترام، وإن هو يحس إن المشكلة اللي هو فيها هيحلها، بس هيحلها حل طويل الأمد، مش حل قاطع حاليا، حتى ولم يأخذ في عين الاعتبار الحالة النفسية أو الحالة المزاجية اللي هو فيها. وطبعا لازم يكون بيتعلم فيها مهارات اجتماعية ومهارات حياتية مفيدة، وأيضا بتخلي المربى يأخذ في عين الاعتبار إن هو بيتعلم في مواقف جديدة، ويحس إن هو قادر على تحسين مهاراته، ويحس إن هو قادر على التعلم أيضا. فنقطة البيهيفير مانجمنت it is not really exclusive than learning. At the end of the day, effective learning happens based on effective behavior management skills. So don't feel at any time that you are wasting your lesson time if you are catering for a behavioral issue in your classroom. You feel free to stop the teaching at all just to fix the relationships within your classroom environments, because you are building on these relationships. As we mentioned, connection before correction is a key. Type. Again, teaching difficulties. It's not over yet. How to approach teaching strategies. I mean, we mentioned there are teaching methodologies, teaching strategies, teaching techniques, and teaching styles. How many styles do I have? How many technique? What is the methodology that I use? Does the methodology differs from a lesson to the other? Does it differ from a subject to the other? Am I aware of all of that? Based on inquiry, do I let the learner to inquire, or do I jump to correct, and I jump to pose the information that I have and my opinion over his or hers? Teaching concepts or teaching content, am I just spoon feeding the information, or am I creating a bigger picture and a generalization so that they can connect to and connect from a subject to the other and connect to even outside the classroom holistic education? فالعلم أو التعليم المبني على البحث والاستقصاء، والتعليم المبني على المفاهيم، ربط التعليم بالأحداث اللي بتحصل في الواقع، سواء كان المحلي أو الدولي، التعليم التعاوني، الفروعات، الفروق الفردية والتمايز الصفي، إن التعليم بيكون مبني على الاختبارات اللي أنا بعملها. يعني انا ايه فايده الاختبارات والفورماتيف اسسمنتس اذا كانت فقط هتتحط على ريبورت كارد، ومش هتفيدني في الحصه اللي بعدها، ومش هتفيدني في الوحده اللي بعدها، مش هعمل تغييرات في المنهج بناء على الاختبارات اللي انا عملتها. كم واحد مننا بيقوم بهذه الممارسات في الصف؟ ف to zoom out, this is all about learning and teaching in the classroom, but it also inclined to the behavior and the response to the intervention that I face when I place my students into these tiers according to the diagnostic assessment that are taking place. Not only that, but also the written curriculum, the assessed curriculum, and the taught curriculum, and circling these dots and linking them together so that there is a coherent curriculum and alignment between what I plan to teach, what I'm actually teaching, and what I'm assessing, which are all related to whether the student is learning or not at the end of the day. And this is basically what, is a classroom setting. Now, when we zoom out of the classroom to see the administration responsibility, because it's not all about the teachers, صح? يعني the teachers are the first line of contact with the students, but there is an administration behind the teacher supporting the teacher. فإيه دور الإدارة هنا؟ بيكون إيه دور الإدارة؟ So basically, the school administration, of course, looks at the policy. الإدارة بتبص على السياسات والمعايير والإجراءات. Who does what, when, how, and why. فبالتالي بنعطي الأدوار وبنحقق structure معين ومنهاج معين للمتابعة. We collect the data and we move on، لأنه you cannot manage what you cannot measure. أي شيء لا يمكن أن هو يقاس، لا يمكن أن هو يتم إدارته بشكل جيد وفعال. فمن أدوار الإدارة بقى في المدرسة إنه التنسيق طبعا ما بين يعني قادة المراحل المعينة، رؤساء الأقسام، مدرس الصف، الهوم روم teachers, the grade level teachers, the teacher leaders or the teacher assistant as well, subject teachers. من خلال الاجتماعات الدورية ان انا اتعرف على الطلاب، اشجع ان يكون في مسار معين ان احنا كيف نتعرف على الطلاب اكتر، ويكون في تولز معينة نديها للمعلمين بالاختبارات، اسف، بالاجتماعات الدورية. and highlighting what work well www and what needs even better if EBI، اللي محتاج يشتغل اكتر in a very positive open communication way so that even teachers feel that they can make mistakes but they can learn as well. It's not only the learners, it's not only actually the students, because teachers are learners. And regular class visits طبعا و post visits and mutual feedback بشكل feedback to feed forward، بشكل إيجابي يساعد على تطوير المعلم من أدائه. طيب, what else a school needs to do? Coordination with parents طبعا. You have to, see the triangle of the communication in a school. Following through with external assessments with the parents if it's needed, for example for tier 3 students مثلا انهم محتاجين more intervention programs, collect data about intervention centers around the school. فين نقدر ان احنا نرشح بعض المراكز المتخصصة كي تقوم بالتقييمات وتعطينا احنا فيدباك وتعطينا تقرير عن الطالب كمدرسة بنقدر ان احنا نفيد بيه المعلمين علشان يشتغلوا على الخطط الخاصة، الخطط الفردية الخاصة which we call IEP, Individualized Educational Plans. Do we have this team in the school? Do we have an inclusion department with psychiatry, not necessarily psychiatrists of course, but maybe a school a clinical psychologist to intervene مثلا in depression situations, in more sometimes even suicidal situations in some level and at some cases as well. So to what extent are we able to intervene and be part of the solution if this happens? Following up with students. You mentioned طبعا following up with parents, but also following up with students from the administrative point of view. إنه it's not only the teacher has a lot on his and her plate. You have your planning, you have your lesson planning, you have your marking assessments, and you need also to take care of your well-being. Of course, it's balanced. So the administration can kick in here and create this responsibility and support with counselors, with psychologists, with the supervisors, and the pastoral team, of course, the pastoral care أو الفريق الرعوي أو فريق شؤون الطلاب. So this is exactly what needs to be done by the school setting, starting from the policy into the procedures and follow through with parents and students to create this triangle of support, the student, parent, teacher support, or the STP triangle. This is basically what I wanted to shed the light on. And I would like to really refer to this picture on the right, which is, the arms of the teachers are actually the staircase or the stairway that the student leads to their success and leads to their dream. This is basically and exactly what we are doing as teachers. المعلمين طبعا ورثة الأنبياء. it's I always feel humbled when I'm in presence of teachers because teaching is the mother of all professions. You need to really, really be proud of yourselves. While we are, maybe in Saudi, we are wrapping up the second term or trimester very soon by the end of this month or February, inshallah. And wherever you are in the world as well, doesn't matter where you are in the academic calendar year. Before we wrap up, and of course, I will need to give you maybe from 10 to 15 minutes going through the questions and answers, the Q&A, if there is any. There is an activity that we want to do together as a wrap-up on Mentimeter. Please get back to your devices and have them handy in front of you. Join menti.com again and use the same code 72642390. And this is a truth or lie. طبعا the question is in English in front of you, so I'll just read it in Arabic or help translate it in Arabic. التعليم والتعلم بيتم في فترة أطول لما يكون مرتبط بمضامين وليس فقط بمواضيع. المضمون يعني عايز أفهم ما هو مضمون اللي أنا بدرسه ويكون مرتبط بهدف. Yes or no, true or false. طبعا of course it's true. وهنا عندنا one answer that it's false. I would like to maybe put in the chat why do you think it's false. لأنه أكيد when we contextualize what we are learning, we see the bigger picture. We answer the question, why am I learning what I'm learning, which is really important and it feeds into the motivation command towards learning. طيب, second question or second statement. Let's see if it's right or wrong. Each learner learns differently and at a unique pace. كل متعلم بيتعلم بشكل مختلف وبوقت مختلف أيضا. عندنا 7 so far in the room and 7 answers. 8 answers, okay. How did that come? And yes, 10. Okay, of course, yes. That is a true statement and it's very clear. Whether the learning differently هنا دي refers to learning styles, which we mentioned that it's not research-based, not based on research يعني to justify it, but it's basically an approach of how do you learn best and in what pace and at what time. And it depends on the subject, it depends on the topic, it depends on the concept that you are learning, and it depends on your age level and your maturity level. It depends on your social and emotional well-being status. It depends on your environment and surrounding. طبعا في many factors. طيب, next. Learning begins with connecting with what we already know. التعلم بيبدأ بربطه بما نعرفه من قبل. صح أم خطأ؟ في رأي إنه خطأ. أنا أعتقد الرأي اللي خطأ بيرجع الأمر إلى إنه طيب ما هو التعلم في بداية الأمر، أول تعلم لازم إنه يحصل بدون ربطه بأي شيء قبله، صح؟ بس learning begins with connecting with what we already know، لأن هناك فرق ما بين learning which is new information, relearning and unlearning. And the three are skills that need to be fully aware of as a teacher, because as you receive students from, for example, from a grade level to the other, and as we, have this enormous flow of knowledge on social media, students need to unlearn a lot to be able to learn actually. There is a lot of learning and unlearning and relearning happening, whether it's intentional or not. But this statement is correct. Learning begins with connecting with what we already know. علشان لما اتكلمنا عن ال long term memory وال short term memory ذكرنا انه learning processing هنا to process the learning you have to link it to the long term memory, and this linking is the processing that takes place so that you are able to reproduce and produce new information and new understandings. Next, we learn best with moderate challenge. يعني هل لابد يكون في تحدي؟ التحدي لازم يكون كبير قوي، ولا ممكن يكون في تحدي بسيط، او ما يكونش في تحدي خالص وانا هتعلم؟ طبعا هنا بيكون التشالنج we mean انه the degree of sophistication, for example, for a specific learning engagement. If I highly challenge my learner, that can end up with a drawback, with low self-esteem, with feeling helpless and hopeless. And if I lower the expectations and lower the bar in terms of the challenge and the assessment, everyone will get the full mark, or everyone will achieve, and accordingly I'm deceiving my learners as well in their potential. فطبعا yes, it is a correct statement. We learn best with moderate challenge, not high challenge and not low challenge. And of course, this is based on scientific research as well. Type. Next, retrieval is a separate process from reception. So retrieving information, getting back an information that I already have, happens in a different process, in a separate process in the brain from receiving new information. Yes or no? ان انا اعيد اخراج المعلومه او ان انا اكتسب معلومه جديده، ده بروسيس مختلف عن البروسيس دي. Yes, that is a true statement. In the brain, the retrieval process happens with different wirings than and different synapses than the reception process. The next statement: there is a clear link between emotional well-being and learning. Truth or lie? Okay, there is a full agreement هنا، في اتفاق على انه في علاقة وطيدة ما بين جودة الحياة عموما وجودة الشعور والاحاسيس اللي هي المستقرة والنفسية المستقرة والتعلم. طبعا 100%. Thank you. Next, to learn we must transfer information from working memory to long-term memory. كي نقدر على التعلم لابد من نقل المعلومات من الوركينج ميموري، من الذاكرة القصيرة بنقول أو short term memory أو الذاكرة العاملة إلى الذاكرة الطويلة الأمد long term memory. And back and forth، لأنه هنا في information coming in, processing, and information coming out. That's how learning always happens. And of course you have to rehearse. ومن هنا بيأتي فكرة الحفظ، لأنه أحيانا كتيرة جدا when you are over estimating inquiry-based learning and thinking that memorizing is not good for your brain. No, it is good for your brain. But focusing on memorizing for as if you can only learn by memorizing, that is the other end of the spectrum. Of course, memorizing is good for your memory. It links your long-term memory with your short-term memory, and it creates this wiring, but also inquiry-based and getting new information and retrieving the old information that you have, linking the new with the old, creates all the learning process and the creativity, and it makes you reach higher order thinking skills, synthesis and evaluation and creation. So yes, of course, to learn, we must transfer information from working memory to long-term memory. Cognitive development does not progress through a fixed sequence of age-related stages. بمعنى النمو الإدراكي، هل أنا محتاج إن أنا أكون في خط معين، سيكونس معين ليه علاقة بالسن؟ طبعا child developmental stages، هنا الناس اللي دارسة بياجي والchild developmental stages ممكن يكون ليهم رأي. بس yes, the statement is true. Cognitive development does not progress through a fixed sequence of age-related stages. Actually, there are, as we mentioned, there are lots of factors that affect cognitive development, not only the age stage. Practice is essential to learn. That's easy. التطبيق مهم للتعلم طبعا. لأنه we have 5 levels of actually making sure that you have learned what you've learned. The reaction, the learning, the application, the impact, and then seeing this impact cascade on others, not only yourself, but others as well. So of course, practice will help this. And as people say, practice makes perfect, but there is no perfect in life. Meaning is constructed by learners, not received from the environment. Okay, 2 and 2. هنا في debate. More think that it's true than it's not true. Meaning is constructed by learners and not received from the environment. There is always a saying that perception versus versus reality. And what is actual reality? Is reality what I perceive as reality, or is reality what is reality? And of course, هنا when it comes to learning, يعني without the philosophical part of perception versus reality, meaning is constructed definitely by the learners and not received from the environment. And this is why we need to focus more on learning rather than teaching. And we need to call it, مثلا, for administrators, lesson observation, learning observation, and not class observation or teacher evaluation. Or no, I'm evaluating the learning. I'm not evaluating the teaching. This is what really matters. Memory is best when we relate the things we are trying to learn to each other. هل في disagreement هنا? No disagreement? All right. Yes, it is 100% true. Linking and creating this different wiring and new wiring in the brain. Fear or threat may interrupt learning. 100%. Of course, goes without saying. Maslow, before we bloom. Building the foundation, safe psychological place conducive to learning. And then learning will happen, even if no teacher is in the room. The more opportunities to engage with the new learning, the more synapses are created in the brain. Of course, again, this is new learning and relearning and unlearning. So, last but not least, I would like us to jot down what is your feedback to feed forward after today's session in comparison to your expectations before today's session. Please jot it down in the last 1 minute before we wrap up. One word, a couple of words, a lesson learned, some aha moments, some takeaways that you will get and maybe use tomorrow morning in your lesson. Some areas of research that you felt challenging, first time to hear about, or maybe you need to delve more and inquire more as an inquirer and educator and researcher. Need practical examples, more awareness, more inclusive, better understanding, more differentiation. All right. Well, just for the sake of time, I really appreciate your time and I thank you fully for this time. I just want to show a couple of documents here for the practical feedback. There are documents specifically for the IB organization when it comes to following up on a referral process for the students and for the learner that I will be sharing on the email with you after the session, and specifically a document that is about learning diversity and meeting students' learning diversity and removing barriers towards learning. What are the barriers that are impeding students to learn؟ إيه هي العوائق تجاه التعلم؟ And also, of course, there are the multiple learning difficulties and learning disabilities that we have spoke about. And there are multiple strategies يعني عشان المسألة practical and how to be practical about our implementation, how to develop learning plans and how to focus on the inquiry, action, and reflection cycle. Hopefully this will be shared with you in English and in Arabic as well on your email that you have shared with us, thankfully. هنا لسه people are writing useful, insightful, more inclusive, cognitive learning. Understand my students. Yes, 100%, definitely. Understanding our students is the way moving forward. I really thank you for joining us today in this webinar, the first webinar of the Educators Clinic, and please keep following us, and we will be sharing more resources moving forward, and hopefully see you soon إن شاء الله ونراكم في الحلقة القادمة of this webinar. Thank you so much, and rise and shine as educators. Thank you. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في أمان الله.